death, most of us instinctively think bad, tragic, something to avoid at all costs. But what if that's not always true? What if there are cases where death isn't bad, or at least not the worst option? That's the question we want to explore in this video. However, first of all, what does it even mean to say if something is good or bad?
What a silly question is that? Isn't good just whatever makes you happy and bad whatever makes you miserable, I guess?
True, but not quite. Actually, many philosophers and individuals have tackled this question of well-being and goodness. Some philosopher was suggesting that hedonistic life where pleasure is maximized is a good life. There exists objective list to what is good and bad. Virtue and ethics, becoming a desired moral being, is a good life. Well, there is no answer to this question, rather. While there might be correlations and tendencies in people living in accordance with these theories, because many do seek pleasure and avoid pain, and because there are some common grounds to how we judge a good life, there are no universally accepted theories that explain good to every human in every situation. The video today will not be reliant on the theories for good, but rather respect the way in which one may set up their own standards of good. Of course, we may not disapprove of the various influences we receive from anywhere, but the ultimate decision maker for the standards for good after the consultation to external influences are essentially an autonomous you. Think about it. One person might think being super rich is the ultimate good. Another may think living simply, close to family, is more important. Even something like Trump as president can feel good for some people and terrible for others. Yes, there are social norms and shared value constantly shaping us into who we are. But deep down, each of us is constantly asking, is this good for me? Does this fit the kind of life I want? Now, that's individual good. Next, we need to be clear about what we mean by death. For this video, we are going to use a strictly naturalistic definition for the sake of explanation and argument. Death is the termination of life and the end of your existence as a conscious subject. When you die, your experiences, good and bad, simply stop. There is no afterlife. Well, this is not because religious views aren't important, but because they change the question. If you believe in heaven, or karma, or reincarnation, the value of death becomes tied to that whole system. Here, we want to isolate a simpler question. If death is simply the end of your experience, no more pain, no more joy, just nothing, is it still always bad for you?
Let's take a deeper look at how death shapes the world we see. If we claim that death is always bad, then its contraposition is immortality always good?
I want to live forever. What a cool idea is that?
But think carefully, is that actually good? Visit the definition of what is good. Humans necessarily create their own conception of what is good and bad actively within oneself, whether that is hedonistic, desire-fulfilling, or virtuous. However, in an immoral world, one would not feel the obligations to pursue meaning in life, and therefore the assessment of what is good will essentially collapse. Think about this. If you had 3 hours versus 10 days to prepare for an exam, assuming you can get an A, it is obvious that you would study more productively in a state of urgency and achieve more learning efficiency within the 3 hours over 10 days. The same goes for life. Though we don't know when the exam will end, we know for sure that it will come to an end. In determinations we may never revert. Therefore, people feel the urgency in life to achieve, allocate their time and resources more efficiently in order to achieve more overall value and meaning in their life. In simple words, to be happy. This is why we study hard to get into university, plan for the future, and decide whom to stay and spend time with. If you were immortal, if time stretched on forever, would you still feel that urgency to create such goals and values, meaning in life? Would you still feel pressure to live well now, or would everything become something you can always postpone? In this sense, mortality is not merely bad, but it is an essential component that allows us to explore the good in our lives. In a more biological explanation, living organisms, including humans, are shaped by survival instincts. We fear falling, drowning, and being sick. We constantly attempt to avoid danger and fight to stay alive. That fear of death is not random. It's an evolutionary tool that aids our survival. And because of such tools, people again feel the urgency in living a better life. Even from a more evolutionary perspective, there is something interesting. Sometimes other evolved traits can override that fear. Think about older meerkats that act as lookouts. When a predator appears, they sometimes expose themselves to danger to protect the younger, more reproductive members. In those moments, survival for the group or the genes outweighs the instinct of the individual to run away. Humans do the similar things. Parents risk their life for children. People run towards danger to help others. Without mortality, like a movie without an ending, that entire process of evaluating, prioritizing, and searching for what really matters would look completely different, maybe even unnecessary. Therefore, that creates the conditions under which we search for value in the first place. And once we see that, it becomes much harder to just say, death is always bad, full stop, without looking at how death itself works as a milestone, shaping the values and choices of the person who faces it. As we discussed earlier, because good is deeply individualized, there are situations where a person can reasonably judge that death is not worse than continued life. Whatever their framework, they try to shape their life according to what they think is good. There just simply exist cases in which one might judge their life as having more value or good as death. Imagine a soldier on the battlefield, or a firefighter in a burning building. They know they might die, but they also hold strong values, such as protecting civilians, saving their comrades, keeping their families and country safe. In a critical moment, they might choose to throw themselves on a grenade to save others, or run back into a collapsing building to rescue someone trapped inside. From our perspective, we usually call this heroic. We honor them. We say that they gave their life for others. However, what's happening from their perspective? They are not choosing death. They are choosing to act according to their deepest value, even at the cost of their life. For them too, merely surviving while others die might feel like the worst outcome. So, can we really say their death is purely bad for them? In one sense, yes. They lost all future experiences. But in other sense, their death is tied to what they consider most important and valuable in life. For that individual, death here is not simply a tragedy imposed from outside. It's the price of living up to their own standards of good.
So, is death always bad? From everything we've seen, the answer seems to be no, not necessarily. As the author of *Sapiens*, Yuval Noah Harari reminds us, much of what we treat as good or bad is in fact shaped by the imagined orders we live in. That is our culture, story, and the shared beliefs about what is a good life and what a good life should look like. Death, too, is judged through those lenses. However, we must realize that we are seeing the world through the lenses in an imaginative way, and that our decision is entirely dependent on us as we create meaning from nothingness in the deepest sense. Similarly, Albert Camus asks us to face the absurd fact that life has no guaranteed meaning, and yet we still choose how to live and how to respond to our own finitude. Even in a meaningless universe, our decisions, including how we face death, can deeply be meaningful for us. So, maybe just pause for a moment, gently breathe in and out. Feel the simplest fact that you exist. Be thankful that you are still living. Yet recognize that it is the inevitable marching of time that shapes whatever meaning your life can have. And in that light, each small choices to explore a little further, to finally begin what has been postponed, and to love a bit more actively becomes a part of how finite life quietly answers its own limits. As Camus puts it, one must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because death disappears, but because meaning is carved out in full awareness that the stone and the climb will not last forever.